Which player props should you bet this Sunday? What's going on, football fans and gridiron gamblers? It's Mitch back here with another week of NFL Best Bets. This time, my favorite player props of week 5 of this NFL season. If that sounds good, spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe for weekly NFL player prop picks, just like this. I break down my favorite picks for every single Sunday of this NFL season. If you're wondering, Mitch, where can I get all of your bets? Your favorite totals, your favorite spreads, your favorite props that you actually bet? Link in the description. Patreon is the place to go, $10 a month, to support me and my journey as a creator, as well as getting some bets on top of it and winning some money. So if that sounds good, check out Patreon. Let me know in the comments your favorite player prop of week 5. We use Outlier to identify trends. We use my knowledge of the NFL schemes, systems, and matchups to put together an analysis each and every week. Let's begin, guys, with the first player prop that I love, and it begins with a guy that I absolutely love. That is Keren Williams of the Los Angeles Rams. I have him on one of my fantasy teams this year, currently 3-1, highest scoring team in the league. Appreciate Keren to fall to me in the second round. Appreciate everybody in that league. But Keren Williams, I have him going over 83.5 rushing yards. The reason for that is he's been awesome at home. Every time the Rams play at home, they score points. This is a high total in this game against the Packers. Two offensive wizards, Matt LaFleur, Sean McVay. And the way that I envision this game is I believe the Rams will want to control the clock, eat the clock, keep the Packers off the field. The Packers are an offense that are quick strike and they're explosive. So the more that you can run the football, gain yards on the ground, control the clock, that to me is the best way for the Rams to pull off this upset at home. You look at his last 5 games at home, he averages 118 rushing yards. Now, only one of these games has been this year, so keep that in mind, which is why this is at minus 110, because if he were on the tear that he was in 2023, this would be an easy bet. But 158 yards, 152 yards last season, late last season, where he was tearing it up. He had another 100-yard game against the Saints late last year. And this year against the Niners in the upset, even when trailing the entire game, keep that in mind, he had 89 rushing yards. So McVay is not one of those coaches that gets away from the running game. He's going to stick with it, which makes me feel better about this bet. Even if the Packers are ahead, there's a chance that he could hit some explosive runs in this game. He's the most trusted member of this offense in Los Angeles. They don't have Kupp. They don't have Nakua. They lean on Keren. He rarely comes off the field. He's going to get 20 attempts, especially in a game, like I said, where they want to keep Love and they want to keep LaFleur away from putting up points quickly and in a hurry. So this is very much like playing the Niners. If you're the Rams, this is how you win the game. You run the ball and you keep that offense on the sidelines. So I like the Rams' Keren Williams to go over 83.5 rushing yards. Again, minus 110. My second pick of week 5 is Javonte Williams, under 53.5 rushing yards. Last week, he did have 77 rushing yards against the New York Jets. But if you look at the trend, 7 of the last 8 games, he has been under this rushing total. Against the Bucs, 12 yards in a win. 12. 17 yards against the Steelers in a loss. And 23 yards in a loss on the road against Seattle. So, not even close. Other than the game against the Jets, this season, 3 out of the 4 games, he hasn't even been half of the amount of yards, right? Not even half of 53.5. Take Javonte Williams under. He's playing Max Crosby, Christian Wilkins, the Raiders front. I wouldn't be too worried about their linebacker position. Tommy Eichenberg is the next man up at linebacker. Diablo's out, I believe. Masterton could be out. Some depth linebackers for the Raiders. but at least Crosby looks like he's going to play. He is questionable. Eichenberg is a sledgehammer of a run defender. He's a much better run defender than a pass coverage linebacker, so I actually think he might help their run defense overall. And trust me, the Raiders are not going to enter this game with a defensive game plan that allows the Broncos to run the ball. They just saw Bo Nix throw for 60 yards. So they're going to pack the box. They're going to take Javonte out of the game, and they're going to force the Broncos to throw it. So I like Javonte under 53.5. This is also minus 110. Next up, we're going to talk about the quarterback on the other side. It's Gardner Minshew. Minshew, one of my personal favorites. Passing attempts over 29.5. This is not really a football-based play, but more so a trend-based play. Minshew has just gone over this number consistently with the Raiders, with the Colts. It doesn't really matter. He has exceeded 29.5 passing attempts in 5 straight games on the road, averaging 37.8 pass attempts. So if you do think the Broncos are going to lead in this game, it's a stronger chance that Minshew does go over this. But at the same time, the Raiders have really struggled to run the ball, and the Broncos have been good run defense-wise. So I would make an argument that they feel safer and they feel better throwing the ball, especially short passes. So I could see them going over this, especially if Minshew's having to throw it late. But he had 38 attempts against the Ravens, and then in a tighter game against the Chargers, he had 33 attempts. So he went over this number by at least 4 attempts in 2 games on the road already this season. Last season with the Colts, they didn't mind him throwing it either, 37, 39, and 42 times on the road. So it's not usually what the Raiders are built on, but they are missing Zamir White, who is one of their big-time running backs. Alexander Mattison is more of a pass-catching running back. So I could see this easily going over with Abdullah and Madison being their primary running backs and the lack of running game that they've had already. I think Minshew is going to have to carry this offense, and I think he will be up to the task over 29.5 attempts. Next up, we're going to talk about Lamar Jackson, the reigning MVP. Just a great trend, and he's playing a bad run defense. Lamar, longest rush over 15.5 yards. This is minus 110. Lamar has exceeded 15.5 as his longest rush in 10 straight games. 10 straight games. His last 10 games, okay? And his average is 20.5. So if you can get this at 15.5, that's perfect, right? Last game against Buffalo, 19 was his long, 16 against Dallas, 25 against the Raiders, 16 against the Chiefs. So he's gone over this 4 games in a row this season. He's playing a Bengals run defense that is not very good and, one of the worst in football. So yes, the Bengals are more familiar with Lamar and his ability to run the football, but I still feel like he's probably likely to go over this. Just play the trend, right? 10 straight games is a pretty significant trend. So nothing but trend here, but honestly, like the Bengals, the defense, they've given up huge plays left and right. I wouldn't be shocked if they were caught out of a run defense lane, if Lamar fooled them with some trickery with his ball handling and he was able to, get the edge just for one big run. Like, it would not be shocking, or even a scramble for that matter. So yeah, Lamar Jackson to go over 15.5, play the trend. Next up, we have Zach Moss on the other side. I have him going under 11.5 attempts. Chase Brown has been the primary running back. At least that's how it felt last week against the Panthers. He had 2 touchdowns, Chase Brown. He had a pretty good day on the ground for the Bengals, and he's looked like the better running back for the past 2 to 3 weeks. So I think the offense is actually trending towards playing more Chase Brown. This is currently at minus 130, so it is favored to go under 11.5. But you look at New England, 9 attempts. Houston, 6 attempts. That was with the Colts, right? With the Colts, they didn't trust him to get that many carries despite Jonathan Taylor being injured for a majority of last year. And the Bengals, they see him as a part-time player, and I think they're starting to move more towards Chase Brown being the primary back. And I believe Brown will be the primary back in this game, because how do you beat the Ravens? You beat them through the air. And this is the primary reason I'm taking this under 11.5, because I don't see the Bengals running into the teeth of this defense, into the strength of this defense too much. I think this is going to be a high passing attempts game. for Joe Burrow. I think there's going to be a lot of short passes for Joe Burrow, and he's going to try to find the deep strike to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins occasionally. But I could see some screens built in here, but not a lot of rushing attempts, because the Ravens are like one of, if not the best run defense in the league so far. It doesn't make sense to give the ball to Moss too much in probably a high-scoring game. And if the Bengals do get caught behind the Ravens, where the Ravens have started very fast in recent weeks, then that makes it even less likely that Moss is going to get the ball 12 times in this game. The only way this happens is if the Bengals are beating the Ravens by multiple scores, which I just don't see happening with the current form of the Bengals defense. I do actually think the Bengals can win this game, but I think they're going to have to do it through the air and by featuring Chase Brown, the better receiving option at running back. So Moss under 11.5 at -130. Next up, Tyler Bass, plus 110 to hit over 2.5 extra points. He has gone over this number in every single game except for last week. So I'm just fading the trend that he had last week of not going over 2.5 extra points against the Ravens. That was more of a matchup thing with, the Bills just struggling. The Bills have rarely ever lost a game by more than one score. We've talked about it many times on this channel. They've only lost 2 games now since 2021 by more than one score. If you think this game is going to be played in the 20s, which I believe the Bills will score 3 touchdowns. So this is basically your bet, that they'll score 21 plus points. That's basically the bet, right? Like, Bass will do that. 5 extra points against Jacksonville, 4 against Miami, 4 against Arizona, and 3 against the Chiefs in the playoffs last year. So his 4 most recent games, you look at that, 4, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. So, the Bills have one of the best offenses in football. I actually like this matchup for the most part against the Texans. They are missing Khalil Shakir, but I do think they'll be able to run the ball better than people think against the Texans. They're a little bit overrated against the run. I think that Kincaid and Knox in the middle of the field, even James Cook could have some success catching the football. And then Josh Allen's a beast. Josh Allen is going to redeem himself for a weak performance last week from this offense. So Bass is a consistent extra point kicker. I think he's going to take this. 9 out of the last 10 games, he has got this number. Plus, you're getting it at plus money after last week. So I think this is a great bet based on the value, based on the odds, and based on the trend of 9 of the last 10 games. Not at home, not on the road, just the overall last 9 out of the 10 games, he has been over 2.5 extra points. Next up, Aaron Jones. Longest rush, over 15.5 rushing yards. We talked about Javonte Williams having his best game of the season by far against the Jets. The Jets have a problem with the running game. They stop the Patriots because the Patriots can't pass, but against a team like the Vikings, where they're going to have to be more conservative in coverage because they're playing Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, and Sam Darnold's been on fire, and they don't want to give up the revenge game to Sam Darnold. Aaron Jones is an explosive back that I trust to go over a 15.5 longest rush. There's going to be at least one big running gashing gain by the Vikings against this Jets front that plays this wide 9 front that's very predictable. So there's ways to scheme that, right? A lot of C-gap runs. We saw what Kyle Shanahan was able to do to this front. I think that Kevin O'Connell will study that tape, and Aaron Jones will be able to gash the Jets at least for one big game. He had 17 as his longest rush against the Packers, 39 against the Texans. He went below this against the Niners, but other than that, last year and even this year, he's gone 3 out of 4, right? And then last year, he was on a tear at the end of the year. He was way higher than 15.5 in pretty much every game except for the game against Chicago. So, yeah, I like Aaron Jones, the way he's playing, the way he's looking. He's looking explosive, fast, quick, great vision. And the Vikings are running the ball well. So, plus, this is the way you attack the Jets. Like, the Vikings are not going to want to pass too much. They're going to want to keep it on the ground. And when you want to keep it on the ground, that means more attempts to have a longest rush, right? Common sense. So 9 out of the last 10, trust Aaron Jones over 15.5. Let's talk about our boy Sam Darnold. Under 29.5 attempts for Sam Darnold. So we just talked about how do you attack the Jets? You attack them by running the football. Plus 100 for Sam Darnold to go under 29.5. We look at his passing attempts with the Vikings so far. He has thrown 24 attempts against the Giants in week 1, 26 against the Niners, 28 and 28 against the Packers and the Texans. This is the sweet spot for the Vikings. They don't want to really exceed 30. That's kind of their magic number. They want to be able to run the ball. And like I said, against DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner and the Jets defense, you want to run the ball. You want to keep that pass rush off balance. You want to be balanced. You don't want to have that defense and that pass rush coming after Sam Darnold. Plus, we saw the late game exposure to Sam Darnold against the Packers where he made a couple mistakes. The last thing that Kevin O'Connell wants in this game is for Sam Darnold to lose them this game. So he's going to want to protect his quarterback by running the ball. So it makes sense from a matchup standpoint. It makes sense from okay, they're playing in London. Let's start slow. Let's run the ball. Let's get our feet under ourselves because we've had a long travel, all that sort of stuff. Everything kind of points to they're going to run the ball a lot in this game. So Sam Darnold under 29.5 attempts. Derrick Henry to score a touchdown. This is probably like the most gimme bet of the entire video as it's minus 169. But, I mean, is he like gonna not score a touchdown? Like, you tell me, right? You tell me. So, Derrick Henry, he's gone over a touchdown in every single game this year. He went for a touchdown against the Chiefs, a touchdown against the Raiders, 2 touchdowns against the Cowboys, and then a touchdown against the Bills. And then I believe he might have had a receiving touchdown at some point as well. But rushing touchdown-wise, he's going to score. Like, the Bengals, bad run defense. And when the Ravens do get to the red zone, which they eventually will, if they won't early, I could see Henry scoring the first touchdown in this game, to be honest. Like, very well could. They trust him in the goal line. They trust him in the red zone. He's been their like go-to guy. They've been running the ball a ton, and it shouldn't change against the Bengals, a team that couldn't stop Washington, a team that couldn't stop the Carolina Panthers on the ground. Derrick Henry should be able to pop into the end zone. Next up, Hunter Henry. Let's just do a combo bet. Hunter Henry and Derrick Henry, the Henry brothers here. Why? Because, well, Hunter Henry minus 145, Derrick Henry minus 169. Makes sense. Combine them. You get some potentially plus odds there. Hunter Henry over 2.5 receptions against the Miami Dolphins. He has gone over this number at home 4 out of the last 5 games. He has been the most reliable receiver for the Patriots. They've added in Austin Hooper. They run a lot of 2 tight end sets, being that the Patriots will probably look to run the ball a lot in this game against Miami because Miami has a weaker run defense than a pass defense. I expect Henry to be on the field a lot. I expect there to be quite a bit of play action, but Brissett loves those like underneath crossers to Hunter Henry or those spot routes to Hunter Henry on 3rd down. He's one of their reliable chain movers. So in a game that should be tight late, I could see Hunter Henry catching 3 passes, 4 passes, 5 passes in this game. Last time they played at home, he had 8 catches against Seattle. Seattle is probably a better defense than Miami, but also Miami is missing some middle of the field defenders. Jordan Poyer at safety, who usually covers tight ends, and David Long is injured as well. So look out for Hunter Henry to potentially have a pretty good game here, minus 145. Jacoby Brissett, quarterback of Hunter Henry. This is kind of contradictory, but under 26.5 attempts is going to be my call. He's only gone over this number once this year and once out of 4. So I like this under 26.5. Why? Well, the main reason is that I think the game will be close. And if the game is close, the Patriots want as little exposure to dropping back and throwing the ball as possible. They want to play defense. They want to run the ball. And that's where their best offense has come from this year. When they hung in there against the Seahawks and nearly won at home, when they beat the Bengals, those were because they ran the ball, right? So the only game that he went over this total, which is, by the way, 26.5, not too low. I mean, you look at the other numbers, 24 against the Bengals, 18 against the Jets. And the Jets, they were getting punished. They were getting destroyed. The other game they were getting destroyed was a 32 pass attempt on the road against the Niners. There's a chance always, if New England is getting blown out, that Drake May enters the game. So there's always a chance for that. But I expect it to be close. So the reason I would go under is because I expect it to be close. And they will be running the ball. So under for Jacoby in this game. Next up, Christian Kirk, over 20.5 longest reception. The Colts will be missing their nickel corner, Kellen Moore, one of the best, or not Kellen Moore. That's the offensive coordinator of the Eagles, former Dallas Cowboy, Los Angeles Charger. I don't know why I can't remember his name. Moore. I'm blanking, guys. Please help me. But he's one of the best in football. Moore. And I have the Jags throwing the ball a lot in this game. The Colts have been susceptible to the air, susceptible to the ground. Their defense generally just sucks. The game is in Jacksonville, and there's been a trend for Christian Kirk. He is a downfield vertical slot receiver. 12 out of the last 15 games, he's gone over his longest reception of 20.5. He did go under against Houston and under against Cleveland, but he did go over against Buffalo and over against Miami. So far, he's 2-2 this year, but last year and years previous, right, he was over like a machine. So I expect this to be a really good matchup for Jacksonville through the air, on the ground. I think they're going to score points. I think they're going to move the ball. So this is probably the easiest defense they've played this year, which is the Colts, by quite a wide margin, by the way. Miami, fully healthy at home in week 1, is a tough environment to play in. Cleveland is extremely tough to play in. Buffalo, really tough, once again. And then Houston. And he was very close against Houston. And he actually had a good game against Houston. So it looks like he's trending forward in terms of his ability to play at a higher level, because he was coming off an injury, remember. So he looks like he's playing a bit better lately. So Christian Kirk, 12 out of the last 15, go over 20.5, longest reception. Terry McLaurin, let's fade him. Let's go under 55.5 receiving yards. This is minus 110. I like the under here because he's going to be facing Denzel Ward probably 99% of snaps. Denzel Ward's one of the best man coverage corners in football. I do think that a lot of the gimme receptions for Terry McLaurin will be limited in this game because the Browns do tend to play a lot of man, and I think they'll blitz a lot as well. So I think that Daniels will have to get the ball out pretty quickly to alternative options. Ward is just a really good player. I think he's a great matchup for McLaurin. They're similar size. They're similar speed. He did go over this against the Bengals, but otherwise he's gone under this number pretty consistently when it comes to failing to exceed 55.5 receiving yards 5 of his last 6 games versus top 10 defenses in receiving yards allowed. This is also another reason Browns are very good against the pass. They're one of the best pass defenses last year. I think they're actually first. And this year, they're still one of the best in football. I'm going to take Denzel Ward to slow down Terry McLaurin. I wouldn't be shocked if the Browns were very competitive in this game and actually maybe made the Washington offense come back down to earth. Next up, we're going to talk about George Pickens. Now, this is moving to Sunday Night Football props. We're going to talk about 5 or so props for Sunday night. George Pickens in general, I like a lot of the overs. I like his longest reception over 22.5. Trayvon Diggs tends to be a boomer bust type corner. I could see him getting beat by Pickens down the field for a big play. I also just generally, I think if I had to bet anything here, I'd bet it minus 115 over 54.5 total receiving yards. I think Pickens will have a nice day. I think that the pass rush of the Cowboys is not going to be nearly as good without Parsons and Lawrence, which will allow Fields to have time. Fields' number one favorite target has been Pickens. When you look at his 54.5, I should say. He went over against the Colts. He went over against the Falcons. So 2 games against bottom 10 defenses as well. That is the trend according to Outlier. 7 of his last 8 games against bottom 10 defenses for rushing yards allowed. I don't know if that's a typo, but the Cowboys are bad at stopping the run as well. So maybe the trend is indicating that when the Steelers are able to run the ball, it opens up things for Pickens down the field, off play action, and for big plays, which would make sense. But I don't like how Diggs has really looked. I didn't like how he looked against Neighbors. He was allowing a lot of big plays. I like how Pickens looks overall, and I think that rapport and that chemistry between him and Fields is constantly growing. So I like him over 53.5 on Sunday night. Then we're going to talk about the other side, Jake Ferguson. I was thinking, the total in the yards is probably the best way to go, although receptions is also another way to go at minus 125. 4.5 is a big number, but I could see the Cowboys having to throw a lot, and I could also see Ferguson catching a lot of short passes. On top of that, 45.5 receiving yards for Ferguson doesn't feel like it's going to be a lot for him to do, because I do think the Cowboys CeeDee Lamb is such a big threat. The Steelers are going to double him a lot, which is going to allow Ferguson to get a lot of targets. Now that Brandon Cooks is out, I think Ferguson is going to get even more volume than he was previously seeing, which he was seeing a consistent amount of volume. 49 yards against the Giants, 95 yards against the Ravens. And keep in mind, the 15 yards against the Browns, he actually got hurt in the game relatively early. 93 yards against the Packers, 69 yards against Washington. So consistently, Ferguson has been an absolute dog when it comes to being reliable for Dak Prescott. So on Sunday Night Football, big place to play in Pittsburgh. He's going to need a lot of underneath targets to Ferguson. I'd take the over on receptions, over on yards for Jake Ferguson. Justin Fields, passing and rushing yards. I'd go over 239.5. I don't like the Cowboys defense. Their pass rush is obliterated by injury. Their run defense kind of sucks. Their linebackers are slow. I think Fields could have a lot of success in a lot of different manners here. And Fields has actually been throwing and running and putting up a lot of yards, even in Pittsburgh, right? Against the Chargers, a really tough defense, much tougher defense than the Cowboys. This was also at home. He had 251 yards, right? And then you look at his days in Chicago, he was putting up yards, 360 against Denver. Other than the Minnesota game, 281, 267, 313. He's been putting up yards, man. 5 of his last 6 games at home, he averages 262 yards. So I see the Steelers potentially scoring in the 20s in this game, which is kind of rare for the Steelers, but I could see a 24-27 point game for the Steelers, given the state of the Cowboys. I mean, did you watch the Giants offense move the ball up and down the field on them? So I could see Fields having a pretty big day on Sunday Night Football. Go over on his total yards. Brandon Aubrey to exceed. I like the field goals, 1.5 field goals. Obviously, he's an absolute beast, one of the best players in the NFL right now. He's only gone under this once out of his last 5 games. I do think Dallas will be able to move the ball a little bit, but I think they'll struggle to score in the red zone, which is pretty typical against the Steelers. So even in a tough place to play, in terms of Pittsburgh, a tough place to kick in Pittsburgh with the wind and the swirling wind that's there, Aubrey is such a different type of dude that I expect him to make every kick he makes. So you're asking him to only have 2 attempts in the game. That's probably going to happen. It's probably going to happen. So I would go over. Plus, I don't think the Cowboys will really be going for it very much because they understand who they're playing. They're playing, plus they have Mike McCarthy, but they're playing the Steelers. So they know it's not going to be like a shootout, or at least I don't think it will be a shootout, even with the state of their defense. So they're probably thinking, especially at the start of this game, they need 24 points to win. So over 1.5 field goals does feel like it makes sense. Our final player prop is going to be fading Rico Dowdle. I would say, fading him on rushing attempts at -115, under 10.5. Not a bad idea. I also like him under 41.5 rushing yards, 8 out of his last 10 games on the road, -110. I like those. I would maybe stay away from the receiving department, but I feel like Pittsburgh's been a great run defense. They clearly have the advantage at the line of scrimmage against the Cowboys' offensive line. I think the Cowboys might try to establish a run game, but I think their most success will come from short passes. And I think they're better off spreading the field and throwing the ball underneath. While I think they're not going to try to run the ball into the teeth of the Steeler defense very much. So if you want to just fade Dowdle on attempts, fade him on yards in general, I wouldn't mind both those bets. You're bound to at least hit one of them. So those are my player prop picks for week number 5 of the 2024 NFL season. If you enjoyed, Gronk spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe and head over to Patreon. Support me, $10 a month, and you'll get all my bets. Thanks for watching. Peace.